We are Makilala TV, the first Filipino-American TV talk show in the New York metro area. Get to know us as we talk to the community leaders, innovators, advocates, and emerging artists who affect Filipino-American life.
Immigration continues to dominate the headlines, with more people, some even with legal status, facing deportation. It's hard to know who's truly at risk and what protections are available. Ang daming tanong ngayon, sino ba talagang pwedeng ma-deport? Paano natin mapoprotektahan ang sarili at pamilya natin? So many questions. Who is actually at risk of deportation? And how can we protect ourselves and our families? There's even talk of changing birthright citizenship, which has helped many Filipinos claim legal status. What do these changes mean for our community? And how might these shifting policies affect ongoing family petitions for green card? These are concerns that directly impact our Filipino families, both here and abroad. Joining me are my co-hosts Rachelle Ocampo and Cristina Pastor, and our guests from FALDEF, Filipino American Legal Defense Education Fund, Licelle Cobrador, the newly elected president, and Randy Gonzales, executive director. FALDEF has long served our community through Know Your Rights sessions and providing legal support to those navigating the immigration system. I'm Jen Fuhrer. Welcome to Makilala TV. So let's start with the big picture. What are the most recent changes to immigration policies that our kababayan should know about? Licelle?
I think we're inundated with the news of mass deportation. So the government is aggressively pursuing mass deportation right now. There's also the April 9th policy that came out. They are screening non-immigrant visa holders, non-immigrant visa applicants for anti-Semitism in social media.
Oh.
And they've been screening everybody anyway, not just on April 9th. So it's just now they're looking more closely on this issue. So I would say those are the main things. And there's also that self-deport message that we see on television. We see that if we have interviews in immigration field offices, and sometimes attorneys who have hearings will receive a flyer that says your client can self-deport.
Wow.
That's been happening these days.
I remember almost 20 years ago over 20 years ago, when ICE people knocked into our door and actually tell us, because we have family members who had deportation orders, and lawyers back then, which we consulted, told us you'll never get deported. Anyway, so the ICE agents told us if you go home, you'll be able to come back, because they know they have
Go home as in the Philippines.
Go home in the Philippines. You'll be able to come back in 5 years, if not, it'll be 10 years or 20. But I was advised that, just stick around. No one will touch you. No one will deport you. Obviously, they didn't give me the right. They didn't give us the right advice.
Do you remember who the president was at the time?
It started with Bill Clinton.
Okay.
And then during Bush.
Okay.
And then during Obama, I asked them for help to get my family back. And they gave me, the law right now is that they have to stay back in the Philippines.
For 10 years.
For 10 and then, or 20 years, actually, that was the letter that I was given.
So you were advised by all these, not all these, but these lawyers and consultants. For Randy and Licelle, what are those red flags that we should be aware of when looking for an immigration lawyer?
Well, not everyone who presents themselves as a lawyer necessarily is one.
Oh my gosh.
So
is there we have to Google their names and make sure that they got their degree at least?
It's a good idea to check, to ask your lawyer, okay, what jurisdictions are you barred? Are you allowed? Are you part of the bar, the state bar? Because to practice immigration law, you have to be licensed in a state in the United States, or a territory in the United States. So you should ask them where they are licensed. And so, and you can look that up. You can verify that.
Okay.
Because a lot of the fraud that happens now with consultants is that they're not actually lawyers. And so they're not qualified, nor is it legal for them to provide legal advice. So
let's say you're a Filipino in New York or New Jersey. Should you consult with a consulate and ask them does the Philippine consulate have a list of valid
I don't think
attorneys?
they do. And even if they did, they probably would not want to step into a situation where they would recommend a lawyer, right?
Because it's like
I think
a business.
Yeah, it's like
thing.
endorsing. It's like endorsing
yeah.
somebody when they should not be doing
But is
it.
that
Maybe
where,
that's what FALDEF.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that where FALDEF steps in?
I guess go to the New York State Bar. You need the roll of attorney's number. Like, ask that person, what's your roll of attorney's number? Or like you can look up that person in websites like Avo or Martindale, and you're going to see whether or not they have like disbarment or discipline. Like, have they been suspended?
Right. We actually use like
have
supposedly
have they been suspended or
famous lawyers, but I'm not gonna go back to the
Right,
different
right,
topic
right.
altogether. But let's say
And Filipinos do that. Like they trust somebody and they don't do due diligence, so to speak. Actually, that person was already disbarred a couple of times. And I've had some of people consult that they used this other attorney and it just royally messed up their claim, their case. And at that point, I can't help them anymore. And I said, who did your case? And I look up the lawyer.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy has been disbarred.
So red flag is make sure that they are
in good standing.
a good
Yeah.
standing
Right.
a lawyer, immigration lawyer that specializes in immigration that is has license for that state that they live in.
It doesn't necessarily have to be where they live in, but as long as they're licensed to practice law in the United States.
Okay.
then
I want to go back to what Licelle said about anti-Semitism. Is that a ground for deportation?
So
If you participated in a rally, a pro-Palestinian rally.
I would say that's very subjective, right? Like, we have First Amendment rights, and it's not limited to USCs or lawful permanent residents or non-immigrants, but there is a ground that the government use now. It's adverse to U.S. foreign policy, and that is also open to interpretation. It's just that there's a lot of discretion surrounding that particular statement.
Okay.
if you're a naturalized citizen, can they deport you?
So only a judge can actually strip you of
Okay.
your U.S. citizenship,
Right.
and there's a whole process to that. There's
That's
a due
true.
process requirement for that. Even lawful permanent residents,
Well, legal.
the judge needs to,
Okay.
Because
Because when you apply for green card, you check all this, like, I'm not a member of a terrorist organization,
right,
I'm not
yeah.
gonna carry arms,
Right.
whatever. I'm not sure about carry arms because, whatever. But so if you break that, they could, and you do something radical that's really, I
like
guess,
you
depending.
violated the terms of your permanent resident status. So
And they can they
that's
just pick you up. You
the
have to go
catch-all.
through the system.
But you have to go through that, you
Due
get a
process.
notice to appear, you
Okay.
appear before the immigration judge,
Mhm.
and what are the allegations against you? So you'll have the opportunity to defend
Okay.
yourself.
Or you should have the opportunity.
You
but
should have the
but
opportunity
some
to
people
defend yourself.
they're saying are not, and they're just getting
And some people are
airplaned
just summarily deported without going through the courts.
I think if you have
Right?
deportation orders,
If you have live deportation orders, they're just enforcing that.
yes,
Ah.
that's what happened to my family. We have live deportation orders, and they enforced it back in the Clinton era, Bush
What about people in immigration jails,
detention centers.
in detention centers?
They're just
Why?
being processed to be deported.
Oh,
I'm just saying, I'm answering
That's
from
true,
my
that's true,
experience.
yeah.
they're being processed.
They're being processed to be deported. And I mean, sadly, I have clients who bring like friends to the office who, I mean, they're not originally our clients, but I guess they didn't see our Know Your Rights session. And ICE officers who pretended to be police or they were in civilian dress went into the apartment building and was targeting other people who had some arrests.
Oh.
and they were like collateral, like, okay, they were
They
asking for
happened to
immigration
be
status
there.
of the others,
Okay.
and they didn't have any arrests, but they didn't have any legal status.
Yeah.
So they were brought to Federal Plaza Detention Center, and sadly, over the weekend, they were already transferred to Texas, and I guess saw an immigration judge there and deported to Mexico.
They're not supposed
Within
to
a
be.
span of like,
They're deported to Mexico
Yeah.
because they're Mexican citizens?
yes, they are.
Okay.
Within
Oh,
like
they're
a
Mexican
span
citizens.
of
A week?
5 days.
That was
Wow.
fast.
5 days.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
my
was
brother would
fast.
have loved to have left the detention center that quickly.
Wow.
It took my brother, took them 30 days to
Wow.
send them,
To get stuck in that.
3 of them.
Remember what they said? If ICE knocks on your door, you're not supposed to say anything.
Or
That's
you
not
have
even-
the right to remain silent.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. And
So
you
is
you
that
don't have to
even
open.
a good advice? I mean, is that
Or like
Should that
ask
be-
for
Are
whether
you
or not
legal
they're
or
really
illegal?
ICE.
yeah?
So are they allowed to
and
lie?
the warrant.
Are they allowed to lie and be like, no, we're not ICE. We're just we're agents of the federal government trying to find somebody. Like how?
All I can tell you is that you don't have to open the door unless they have a warrant.
A
signed-
judicial warrant.
Correct.
Mhm.
A
A
judicial warrant.
Is
So-
a deportation order a warrant?
No.
No. Oh, okay.
So you
There's
can
different
ignore
warrants.
you
There's
can ignore a
administrative
deportation
warrants.
order.
Well, you don't have to open your door.
Mm-hmm.
If ICE is at your door and they come to you with a deportation order, that doesn't mean you have to open the door.
Okay, all right.
So if you're in this country illegally, what do you have to do now? What would you advise somebody?
I would say see an immigration attorney.
Okay.
You could have immigration relief that you just didn't think about or didn't explore. And maybe an immigration attorney could enlighten you
Mhm.
on that. Or if you don't really have any relief, then the immigration attorney can give you advice about what are your rights, and things like that.
Would you ever advise them to self-deport?
So
depends on the
my answer would be
situation.
it depends.
Yeah.
If the person has immigration relief. So immigration is so fact specific. It's very dependent on unique circumstances of each person, right? So it will depend on what they have in terms of relief, and if they don't, then I would say that.
So there's like kids that have come here like when they're 3-4 years old, not even knowing that they're undocumented.
Mhm.
They had
Yeah.
no idea. And now that all this news is coming up that there's people who are getting deported even though they didn't have any.
Don't we have DACA that's still up and running? That's still like they're
It's
getting
still up and running,
applications?
right?
Well,
It's
there's
still-
still DACA. You
it's
can
still
still
effective.
renew,
Mhm.
but there's court decisions that said DACA was illegal.
In the first
Because
What
it
is?
was an
Can you
executive
just give
order.
a quick 10-second? What is DACA?
Deferred action for childhood arrivals. That's relief for children who were brought into the States unknowingly.
which you mentioned.
Yeah.
That they were actually undocumented
Yeah.
and they're able to live and work in the United States.
That's right. Yeah.
What would it take for Congress to turn DACA into a legislative?
It is law.
No, it's an executive
it's not.
order.
It's not law.
It's not
No.
like that.
DACA is not law.
No,
Oh.
not in the sense that it went through Congress,
Right.
Both houses of Congress, and then
Mm.
signed by the president. It's not not a law like that.
Oh, okay.
But that was an Obama era executive
Order.
order.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So maybe we should rally our politicians.
I know.
At
like,
this
I've been
point-
rallying for
Dream Act.
immigration reform for like 40
Right,
years,
right.
and nothing is
Well,
happening.
yeah, there hasn't been any action on that.
And even just taking away the ban. If you're here, if you overstayed and you have to go home, you can't come back for 5 years. You can't apply 5 years or 10 years. That the ban's still there. I mean, that's all the way in the 1990s. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many
things that's wrong
So-
about immigration policy.
So immigration today is more dysfunctional than it has ever been
I think it's always
over the
been
last
dysfunctional.
several
I think
presidents.
this is more about enforcement now and
Yeah.
how it's being implemented. But the laws, they haven't changed.
I know. It's
Right.
just a matter
Really?
of we have to decide: do we enforce the laws or not?
So why I asked you before who was the president, because that's gonna really determine like how are the immigration laws going to be enforced, whether they're going to be lax or they're
Yeah,
gonna be
my
very
first
strict.
brother was deported, was picked up during Bill Clinton. He was
Okay.
at work and he had to run and they handcuffed him, the whole thing.
So you can be deported at work at home.
Yeah, my parents
In
and my two
schools,
brothers,
yeah.
they did it at the same time, one in California and one in New Jersey, and they make sure they did it, they knock on the door at the same time so that you can't alert
Wow.
the other person to hide
Across
or to
the
run away.
country.
Yeah, they do their homework. Yeah, we didn't realize that they were scoping the area.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They do that. And the one thing though, like remember during Bill Clinton, there was a Cuban child where they pointed a gun, like the ICE officers.
Yeah,
during
Elias or something.
Yeah.
Elian. Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
kind of did the same thing to my brother and the little son during
gosh.
Bill Clinton's.
You know what I heard is if you came here as TNT illegally, and then you were able to marry somebody and you became legal, you can be deported because the basis for your coming here was illegal in the first place. Have you heard of something like that?
Whoa. I'm not.
I've
I was
heard.
gonna say, I know someone that might be in that situation.
I've heard of something
So,
like that.
Christina, the term coming in illegally,
You
that-
came as a tourist, for
that
example.
usually means you
Cross
cross
the
the border. But if you had a visa,
Mhm.
all that's required to adjust status is admission and inspection. And having the tourist visa means you were admitted and inspected.
Right.
So
But
that's
then-
not really
but
coming
you
into
overstayed.
illegally.
But then you extended your
Yeah,
stay.
if you overstayed,
You overstayed.
Right.
You
if you
overstayed.
overstayed,
You still
that's-
got vetted in the first
right,
place.
that's
right?
unlawful presence.
Yeah.
You have the unlawful presence, but you married a U.S. citizen. That should have been forgiven because that's
That should have been.
But you have to apply for the change of status,
you.
right?
You
Yeah.
apply
That's
for
why you have to
adjustment of
go,
status.
right.
Yeah, but
And that overstay will be forgiven because you married a USC.
I guess if it's a complex immigration thing, you shouldn't do it on yourself by yourself. You should hire a lawyer
Right.
that would walk you through.
probably.
So I think you're talking about what if the marriage was based on fraud?
Oh yeah.
no, the marriage
That's
is
different.
okay. The marriage is okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But the fact that the person overstayed means that the circumstances of him being here was questionable or in the
Okay.
first place.
And there might be
Mm.
more going
Mm-hmm.
on there. There might be things like the person entered on an assumed name.
Could be.
The tourist visa was not actually in his or her name,
Oh.
or it had a different birth date. Or
Yeah.
so then they would use those as saying you actually used a fraudulent document coming
Yeah.
in, and not necessarily that the marriage was fraudulent,
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
but how they were admitted and inspected was the problem. So then you would need a waiver to forgive that,
Oh my gosh.
coming in on an assumed name.
You mentioned waiver.
Antonio
Antonio
Vargas.
Antonio Vargas was able to get an O visa based on a
Yes,
waiver, right?
yes.
Can you explain that very briefly?
It's more
and
like
how come he got it in Mexico?
well, I think that's just the country where you can do your non-immigrant visa interview quickly,
Mhm.
as opposed to
Going
going
to
to
the
the Philippines and going to
Oh,
Asia and the
okay,
wait
all
time
right.
and all that.
Mhm.
But the waiver, you can always apply for that for whatever visa you're applying for, and
Mhm.
just if you convince the U.S. government that they should waive your unlawful presence and why you were
Mhm.
originally not qualified,
Mhm.
then you can get.
You can get.
So I admire FALDEF so much because I remember even during my community organizing days post college, FALDEF was really that organization that I looked up for, like Know Your Rights workshops and really keeping our community informed. What is FALDEF up to right now? Are you
So-
guys busy?
Yes, so
Especially now.
we've restarted our Know Your Rights program.
Good. Okay.
So thankfully we have some funding now, and so we can do live and in-person events, or we can do online events, and we're trying to bring these events to communities where they may not have this information, and there's usually a very big demand for these types of events because people wonder, like they want to be able to ask questions, and so
In a safe space.
correct,
Yeah.
right?
Not just for Filipinos, right?
Not just for
Okay.
Filipinos,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we're Filipino and we
Mhm.
serve the Filipino community, but we're open to many other minority communities and underserved communities as well. So
How did you find out any upcoming Know Your Rights events?
So we have social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we have a website, faldef.org.
Mhm.
And so we're going to be making up our schedule for the upcoming. So we just got a new round of funding, and so our
Congratulations.
thank you.
Thanks.
And so we're going to be making up our schedule. Well, we're in the process of making up our schedule now, and so we'll be announcing soon, like when our next events are. And so,
What are the biggest fears of immigrants right now? What do they go to you for?
So immigrants, even lawful permanent residents, if they travel internationally, they want to know what their rights are when they're
okay.
re-entering the country.
Right.
That's the most common question
Mhm.
in FALDEF that we encounter. And of course, like ICE situations, how to handle that.
Yeah.
Not that they're undocumented.
Mhm.
Like, what if they have a friend or a coworker who is like, how do they respond to ICE being in the workplace or at
Mhm.
home or
That's right.
even in
Yeah.
public?
I have family members that, I think we all have family members that spend like 6 months Philippines, 6 months here, you know.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I've had those family members quickly, shorten their trip in the Philippines to
Yeah.
make sure that they're here in the U.S. because of that fear.
I think 30 days is what they're saying, right? Is
Like
that
they-
correct?
No, but they're
You can
allowed.
only be out of the country for
Oh, for
30
your
days.
US citizen.
But you're
you
using,
can go.
if they're a permanent resident, they can go in and out, right? I
So,
hope.
Lawful permanent resident means you live in the U.S. and the U.S. is your primary residence, right?
Mhm,
That
mhm.
means you spend majority of the year here.
Can be
Mhm.
6 months over there.
And 6 months plus 1 day is majority of the
Yeah.
year.
Okay.
But we know all those people who just come here 2 months and come back. So
Mm-mm-mm.
I won't say
and there was no problem then.
right. There was
Yeah,
never
yeah.
a problem, but you could actually be someone who's abandoned
Oh,
your
okay, yeah.
permanent resident status
Right.
because you've been doing that every year, just staying in the U.S. for 2-3 months, and if that pattern has
During winter time.
right, like,
yeah, during winter,
So-
which shouldn't
but
be an
then again,
issue.
you'd have to be put in proceedings
Mm.
to say to defend yourself, like, oh, it's still really my primary residence. But how do
Yeah.
you defend yourself if you're
Mhm.
not really here?
Yeah.
What if you're a U.S. citizen, naturalized? Will there be an issue?
I
No,
don't think
right?
so.
There
You can
shouldn't
be
an
anywhere
issue.
in the
You
world.
can be
Yeah,
yeah,
right?
that's right.
Because that's another thing of like,
Yeah.
oh no, if you're a natural citizen, you have to like worry that they'll take it away from you
No.
when you're crossing.
No,
Or the
all you
port
need
of
to
entry.
prove is your identity, your immigration status.
So let's
If you're a U.S.
say-
citizen or lawful permanent resident.
Okay.
Let's
So
say
if
you're
I-
stopped.
Yeah,
You
go
don't
ahead.
have any ID. And
You have your
somebody asks
passport,
you-
right? You have your passport.
I mean, I don't carry my
No.
passport.
Who carries their passport? Should we be
What
carrying
would
our
you do?
passport?
Passport card.
Should
Right.
we be?
You need a real ID to travel.
No, I refuse to get one.
Real ID.
I have my
don't-
passport. Why do I need a real ID?
Passport should work, right?
Yeah.
If passport doesn't work,
So what's your advice? Should we be walking around with our passports? And if an ICE agent or federal agent asks me, "Are you U.S. citizen?" Do I have to answer?
Well, if you are, you can say yes.
But
Right?
do I have to?
Yeah,
Well, you have the right to remain silent,
True.
right?
Okay.
But
but it makes you
you'd
suspicious.
also expose yourself to, okay, you're
More
going to be taken
questions.
Yeah.
somewhere.
Mm-mm.
But if you are, you can say yeah, right?
Yeah, so you have the right to remain silent, of course. But
You
also,
can,
if you're
yeah.
trying to go home and you're a citizen, like it's
just say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right. It's
Yeah.
not going. I don't believe it's going to hurt you to say, "I'm a citizen."
Yeah.
And but I don't believe it's necessary to bring your passport around because they can verify your citizenship without that. But
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
everything.
What about a
right.
photocopy of the passport? That should be okay too, right?
Yeah.
sure.
On your
Uh-huh.
phone.
So yeah, carrying your passport around is.
Well,
kind
how
of
do you know that
inconvenient.
the people are really ICE people?
Oh.
Should you look for their ID? Are you really with ICE?
You can ask
Or-
them for ID, right?
Yeah.
You can
Are
ask
they-
them for
are
ID.
they-
Yeah,
can
you can
ask
see
them
their
for
ID.
Are they
Not
required
necess-
to give it to
I
you?
don't think
though?
they will
They will-
necessarily
Yeah, I was
respond.
gonna
but-
say.
Are they really stopping people to see if they're legal or not?
They are in
They have
some
checkpoints.
locations, in some
Yeah,
places.
they
Yeah,
have checkpoints that
I remember
this is
those
all
times.
social media. I don't know.
really.
Yeah, like they were so scared
It
to
is
cross
happening.
anything. Like
Yeah.
even you driving from New Jersey to Vermont or Florida.
I
What you're
just
trying
read
to-
in the papers that there are some deportation cases that are being stopped by the courts, by the judges.
Okay.
And the administration has not really followed the orders from the
Okay.
courts.
Okay.
So what does this mean?
You mean that they're continuing to deport them?
Yeah, the deportations are already done.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I believe that the cases you're talking about, I believe that there are still either they remanded it to the whoever the trial court was, or they're appealing, but I think they're still in the appeals process, which is why there's kind of nothing going on right now, and there's things are staying as they are, because I think this is if I'm correct on this. But yeah, I believe that these are tied up in like appeals.
In appeals,
believe.
okay.
Yeah.
Doing the last question, as FALDEF officers, what do you think people should know about you guys, especially with this immigration thing?
Well, we're here to help. So use this as a resource. Like if you want a Know Your Rights event in your community, like we can arrange that. We can do a virtual one. We can do an in-person one. The in-person one, we're going to need more time because there's, we're going to have to worry about venue and other logistics. But doing and organizing an online Know Your Rights event is not as logistically difficult. So, but yeah, like we're a resource. Like you can ask us questions and you can come to our events because they're generally open to the public, unless we're doing an event where there's like we have a sensitive audience that doesn't necessarily want to reveal their identity or their documented status. That may have closed attendance, but
so
for the
we
most
can
part,
reach out to you guys for the resource for Know Your Rights. And
Right.
if we have any type of immigration related question, they can DM you at Instagram.
Yes.
Like how do we reach you?
Through our website.
Okay,
So
website.
so on FALDEF.org, we
Okay.
have a contact page, and so people can submit questions there. And
Do you get a lot of questions?
we do get a lot of questions.
Yeah, we do
We've
get
been getting a lot of
questions.
questions.
And I want to say right now, FALDEF provides legal services to those who cannot afford it.
Perfect.
Oh, really?
Perfect.
Pro bono?
It's not
Pro
for
bono
everybody.
service?
Right.
Those who
It's for
cannot.
people who cannot
Cannot
afford
really.
it.
Okay.
And you go to the channel, so making sure
That's
they
the
really
big
can afford it.
misunderstanding.
Yeah,
Yes,
yes.
is that our pro bono
Services.
free services are for it's not.
Okay,
It's
right.
only for people who cannot
Okay.
actually afford legal
So you have
services.
a team of lawyers who can provide services.
A small one so far, but we're growing. We're trying to grow our team to a national team so that we
Wow.
can serve all areas of the country.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's right.
I think that's it for our panel. To our guests, the FALDEF officers, thank you for gracing our show and for your tireless advocacy and service. To our viewers, if you or someone you know is facing immigration concerns, now is the time to get informed and seek help. Go check faldef.org. To our cast and crew, thank you. Maraming salamat sa ulitin. Until next time, here at Makilala TV.